Hello and welcome to episode 3 of The Owl's Nest, your source for information on the Houston Outlaws. And today, this episode is going to be fairly momentous, aptly titled Fact Fiction, because we do have a new addition to the Outlaws, Fact Fiction himself. And of course, what would be the good of talking about Fact Fiction if we weren't going to be joined by him here today? Fact Fiction, how are you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing all right. Just excited.
So, many people have followed competitive Overwatch for a long time, do know who you are, of course. Most recently, before joining Outlaws, you were a part of the Overwatch World Cup team, Team USA. And before that, you were a longtime member on Team FaZe, and you go even further back than that. Can you sort of give us a brief rundown of your history and what you've done in Overwatch and sort of how you ended up at this point?
Sure. So I first started playing Overwatch in the open beta is when I started playing a lot. I wasn't in closed beta, so April 2016-ish is when I started playing a lot of Overwatch, and I was playing with some friends from a different game, Dota 2. It's a game I played before Overwatch, and we just had a group of guys together, really competitive people, and we decided right before the game came out, hey, we want to try to go hard in Overwatch. And so release comes and we're playing, we're doing well, we're having a good time. We make a team, we scrim some people, have okay scrim results, and I end up leaving that team after Raucus sends me an invite to join his amateur team. This is a team called Ono. It was mine and Raucus's team before FaZe, and we were the best tier 2 NA team in the summer of 2016. We had good results against Fnatic, C9. I think it was TSM at the time, but then they became Cole. We were one series away from going to Gamescom as an unsigned, unsponsored team, and it was a really, really close series against Fnatic. And so after that series, we were approached by FaZe, and so FaZe came to Ono, the team Raucus and I were on, and they offered to combine us with the We United team, which was Too Easy and Shadowburn, Forsaken, and Zoms. And after that, the rest is history.
Wait, one thing. I just need to note one thing you were forgetting here, perhaps that modesty, but you actually killed FaZe and took their power because there was a very notable upset in that tournament where FaZe had a previous roster before you were on it, and I remember looking at it going, wait, they lost to this team called Oh No, which was a really big Oh No because there was a lot of hype around that FaZe team, and then you ended up getting signed by FaZe. So I think it's worth bringing that part up where you literally killed the existing FaZe team and then joined FaZe.
Yeah, that is ironically enough. Too Easy was playing on that FaZe team that we ended up beating, and then Mendo was playing on that FaZe team that we ended up beating. So the history in this game runs deep. So we beat that FaZe team, and then they pretty much disbanded, remade their roster with me, Raucus, Too Easy, Zoms, Forsaken, and Shadow. And then that roster was together for a while. We went to E-League, the Overwatch Open, and MLG Vegas, had good results. Then after MLG Vegas, we made some roster changes, and then we moved into Contenders, made some more roster changes. I got on the World Cup team in May for Team USA, but we played Contenders. I was FaZe, did pretty well in Season 0, but barely made it into Season 1. And then in Season 1, we did pretty well, ended up getting second place. And that's pretty much my history.
So this is where I kind of want to deep dive a little bit further here and note that many members of Team USA were able to immediately go from that tournament directly to OWL teams, and you had to face a few more trials and tribulations where, because main tanks perhaps were recruited earlier in some of these teams, you weren't immediately brought on. How were the trials and tribulations basically going through kind of the Contenders grind, or I guess Contenders tryouts grind, and then where was the light at the end of the tunnel where suddenly you got the tap on the shoulder to go, hey, would you like to be an outlaw?
So yeah, there's definitely a lot of trials and tribulations. We were at BlizzCon, right, preparing for our BlizzCon boot camp, and obviously Raucus, Matt, and Jake knew, hey, we're Outlaws. So during the whole time, they're talking about their plans and going into Overwatch League, and so for me, it like I was, it felt like how I was like kind of excluded in that case, just because like I wanted to be in the league so
I
badly,
empathize.
and
I
so
empathize. Let me tell you.
yes, I wanted to be in the league so badly, and I when I found out that I wasn't or so when I found out that the team that I was trialing with before BlizzCon ended up going with someone else, I was so devastated that I like almost didn't want to go to BlizzCon, but I'm very, very glad that I did because it was a wonderful experience. But anyway, moving on to that. After BlizzCon, um, basically there was a bunch of different rosters being formed for trialing. I played on a team of a bunch of free agents organized by Rafflegator for like all of November, and then AKM approached me in late November saying, "Hey, you want to go to Taiwan?" I was like, "Okay, sure, let's go to Taiwan." And so the we went to the Overwatch Heroes Rumble. You were at it. Like AKM made our team. We didn't do well in Taiwan, but it was a fun experience. And then I'm flying back from Taiwan, and I'm sitting in, I think it was the Chicago airport, waiting for my flight home when the contenders announcement comes out. It's like, oh, there's a roster lock on January 15th. I have to do a lot of trying to figure out who I want to play with. So all over Christmas, and the beginning of January, I was like trialing with pretty much every Overwatch Academy team.
You were one of the most wanted. I could say outright where I was watching a lot of those scrims, it's like, oh, Fax played with this team this week. Now he's played with this team. And I feel like there are moments where you're playing with like 3 or 4 different teams a week where you were very in demand, but on the same note, from your perspective, it was sort of, you wanted to make sure you got on the right team and that you made the most of the opportunity because you didn't know you were going to get picked up for OWL at that point.
Pretty much. I played with everyone. I wanted to make sure I had the best roster so I could, show off in contenders if I didn't get an Overwatch League, so I could get an Overwatch League Season 2. So I scrimmed with, like you said, 3 or 4 teams a week until like about halfway through January. They pushed the contenders deadline back twice, no, maybe even 3 times. And eventually I had committed to a roster. So I scrimmed with that roster for a while, but I didn't end up being able to play on that roster for some reasons that it just didn't end up working out. And so after that, another team approached me, and I was in talks to get signed with this team. I was like, I had the contract with this team in my hands, essentially. And then the day before I was going to sign the contract, I get a message from my old teammate Rockus saying, "Hey, what are you doing for Overwatch League? What are you doing for contenders?" I said, I'm almost finalized for contenders with this team. And he's like, "Wait, don't do that. We're gonna try to get you on Outlaws." And I was like, "Okay." And then after I got that message, the wheels were set in motion. We worked on the paperwork, and I ended up getting signed. And then after I got signed, not even a day later, it was going. Slasher was apparently going to leak it, right? Because he had leaked like everything, and so our social media team like instantly put out the announcement. So a day after I finished signing, I was announced to the team. It was like really crazy, overwhelming.
I like to imagine a scenario where you're just sitting there about to sign your contenders contract and Rockets just comes out of nowhere, slaps the pen out of your hand and goes, "No, you're coming with us now." I'm not sure Rockets would actually
Honestly,
yell out like that. I think it'd be more like Jake or someone yelling out. But hey, either way, the point is you were saved at the last moment where I'm sure you would have absolutely torn it up in contenders, but why do that when you now are an outlaw?
of course, my goal was always and has always been getting into Overwatch League, and I was pretty transparent with every team I was trialing with. So when I got the message from Rockus, I was I was ecstatic, basically, because I've been telling people who know me for like the past few weeks or the past few months that the team I support in Overwatch League is Houston Outlaws. I would love to be on the team because I've played with so many of these players before. It seems like a great team environment. And then I just get the message and they wanted me. So
So
it's just
let's move to the future then. Now that you're repping the green and black, what sort of role can people expect from you on the team? Obviously, you are a main tank player, so the odds are you'd be swapping in and out with Muma. You've played quite a bit with many members on the Outlaws roster, of course, most notably in Overwatch World Cup. I guess, where can fans expect to see you get played?
So I think it depends on how scrims are moving forward, and how the coaching staff decides how they want to use both Muma and I. But I think a lot of us envision something similar to what New York Excelsior does with the Mano Janice split, where it's just a difference of play styles. So one of us will come in on some maps, and one of us will come in on other maps. Muma is extremely good, and we're both extremely competitive. So neither one of us really wants to be a sub for the other. So I think it'll be interesting to see how we both improve over time. But as of right now, I see myself playing on some specific maps and splitting maps with Muma. But we'll see how it ends up turning out.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me here today. Best of luck to you as we move into Stage 2 and you get to play at the Outlaws down in Burbank.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. All right, guys, and we are going to be moving forward here where we just got the first word from Fact Fiction, but now we have what many people might consider to be the face of the Outlaws. Jake, good to have you here.
Hey, it's great to be here.
So, Jake, I want to ask you, of course, since we just got done talking with Fact Fiction, how does it feel to have Fact Fiction on the team now, where, of course, you go way back with him from the Overwatch World Cup? He was on Team USA. Now you get to add his versatility to the team, where even though Muma is, of course, the main tank that's been on Outlaws, you have the ability to mix in Fact. What does Fact bring to the team?
You know, I think what we've seen on other rosters that have had, multiple really strong main tanks, and really those have just been the Korean rosters, where there's a few players on the team who are really strong at all the main tank roles, is that it's a very stylistic role. It's a role where there's a lot of lack of clarity about what's exactly right. It's not exactly hit the shots, don't hit the shots. There's a lot more decisions to make, and it's not exactly clear which style is better than another. So I think having another style of play that we can bring to bear is going to be really, really valuable. Fact can also play, all the main tank roles just like Muma can, but he plays them in a very different way. So I think it's going to give us a lot of depth to our play style. We're going to be able to change things up in a way that we maybe haven't been able to before.
Cool. And that kind of brings me to where I was going to bring this next, where, of course, let's reflect a little bit. This is a changing of the times here where Stage 1 is done and in the books. But Stage 1 was very up and down for the Outlaws. It was down in the beginning and then very much up. And I think one thing people kind of point to is the idea of Tyrong doing an excellent coaching job. And I guess walk me through what Tyrong did in terms of mid-season adjustments, how that helped you guys rise above, and then what Tyrong might be able to do with someone like Fact now on the roster and swapping things up.
I think a big thing Tyrong and definitely also Hyunwoo really helped us with, at that point in the season, we had that inflection point where we had done really poorly and then really turned things around. I think it was a combination of difference in the challenge of the schedule. But also, I think the coaching staff really motivated us, really just pushed us higher in our gameplay. Like, we really redoubled our efforts in terms of, demo reviewing and going back over our gameplay, going back over our matches, really just working, seeing, where did we go wrong here, specifically time and time again. And I think that kind of effort really led us to solve a lot of the problems that had come up in our play. Without us really realizing. As a new team, you kind of have these natural bad habits that different players bring to the team, where they're just ways they're used to playing from previous teams. And really rebuilding the team from the ground up. So it's not Team USA, it's not FNRGFE, really remaking the team so that it's a new team and it's the Outlaws. And I think that Tyrong and Hyunwoo and Mezra as well were really able to actually achieve that at that point in the season. We're able to really get us to rethink the game, get us to rethink our roles, and come together as a strong team and not just a strong group of individual players.
And to sort of ask you about this on a personal level, Overwatch League, of course, has been an all-encompassing experience for all involved, and you were no stranger to the Overwatch competition prior to the OWL, but how has it been sort of going into the more regimented structure of OWL, where, of course, you were on teams like LG Evil, you did have the sort of free look of Overwatch World Cup, but it wasn't quite the day-to-day experience that you have at OWL, and how has this sort of changed you as a player?
I think that what the OWL has come to test is, a level of professionalism that really wasn't there in prior Overwatch competition, as a player at least. I think, in the past, this, sparse tournament format was really all about just peaking for the tournament, and then it doesn't really matter. You just need to not lose, and then, hey, it's over. We got first place. But I think the Overwatch League really, it's a much longer grind. There's a lot more time. And that also really changes the game because you can't just be running, one strategy that no one really understands for a tournament. You just run over a tournament because you figured something out first. I think the Overwatch League has you get so much more time to iterate and work on strategy that you really can't just have cheese strats that kind of, sneak out wins. People are going to be expecting those things. They're going to be watching your gameplay. They're going to see it coming a mile away. So it's really, you have to develop stronger fundamentals as a team, and really just, have a deeper strategy pool than you had to in the past, I think.
Well, you've given me a perfect transition into my next topic, which is going to be Stage 1, it's gone, it's over. Now we move into Stage 2, where the meta will be, in many cases, drastically different, where Mercy will not be played anywhere near as much. Junkrat got hit a little bit with the nerfs, but by all accounts will still be used a decent amount. Of course, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. But I guess now that you've added Fact to the team, now that you're moving to Stage 2, do you think that the changes are beneficial to Outlaws?
I think it's kind of hard to tell right now because everything's in flux. When every team is readjusting to this new meta, it's really hard to test any one strategy because you might be really successful against one team because they're running a certain style, and then another team has a really different idea about how to play the game. So the strategy you want to test is way less effective. When there's this little stability in the metagame, it's really hard to tell what's going to come out on top. But my first impression is that there's going to be a lot more versatility and variability in the compositions you see. I think there's going to be, more hero swapping, especially on the support role, more, hero diversity. Dive still feels really, really powerful, but on a lot of maps, we're seeing Reinhardt heavy styles come back in a way that they really haven't for months and months. So I think there's definitely pluses and minuses for us right now, but it's kind of hard to guess how it'll all shake out.
So you mentioned Reinhardt here, and this is sort of one of the hot button issues where I'd love to have your opinion on, but we've seen teams try to various different tactics as we've seen through the different tournaments, whether it be Beat Invitational, the recent Fiesta Bowl, Overwatch Collegiate Championship. 3 tank, 4 tank. Do you think quad tank is something that's actually viable? Will it be more gimmicky? And then 3 tank, I guess, if it's a no on quad tank. Where do you see the role of these sort of compositions that use more than 2 tanks at a time?
I think early in the patch they found a lot of success, but I think mostly that was a way to prey upon the metagame, play upon people's play styles, because people haven't played against quad tank in a really long time. So that kind of composition, the style of composition, it was really different, and I think it probably surprised a lot of people and caught them off guard. You have to play very differently against quad tank than you do against even a triple tank or a more traditional setup. So I think it kind of caught a lot of people off guard at the start. But I think as the patch develops, we're going to see less and less of it because fundamentally the style is a lot weaker than it ever was before. I mean, if people forget that the old quad tank back in its glory days had D.Va with the incredibly long matrix, 400 armor, Roadhog insta-killing people, the hook was unstoppable, and Ana was also incredibly OP and just had such a high game impact with the double heal bio nade. So I really think that it's going to be difficult to see that level of success again for quad tank. I don't expect that. I also think the new Junkrat is really effective against quad tank. Just having 2 concussive mines is a complete game changer in terms of being able to kite the tanks as they move around the map. So I don't think the style will be as effective as it was, back in the old Bird Noises days. But I think you might see it on some maps. It might be a niche style.
So that brings up a pop question here. As a Junkrat player, are you going to be happy to see teams potentially try to attempt running 3 or 4 tank versus the Outlaws if they think they could get a gimmicky start over you?
Oh, bring it on. That's all I have to say. Bring it on. I love playing against some quad tank on Junkrat. Get a couple rip tires every fight.
Not 1 rip tire, but 2.
Yeah, get 1 at the start, one to open it up, 1 to close it out.
Excellent. Okay, so now moving over to the last talking point, we're going to be looking at the week ahead of you where it's a little bit of deja vu coming out where you have a tough week 1 to say the least going up against both London and Boston. How do you think the rematches are going to go, especially in light of all the meta changes that are abound?
Oh man, it's crazy to play two of the top teams in the league as our first two matches of the stage 2, and as well it's the rematches. It's the rematch from our very last week, which I thought was kind of insane that they scheduled it like that. But you know, it's going to be tough for sure just to start off against two of the top teams, you know, especially at this point when there's way less stability in the meta. You know, who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what strategies people are going to bring to bear? I definitely feel good about our chances. I think we could definitely come out with a win. I think anytime there's a new patch, there's an element of it being like an equalizer because of that instability and that, you know, that no one's really sure about what's exactly the best to run. That tends to be an equalizer. So I think, you know, it'll be weird to see two strong teams play on this patch at the very beginning, but I am glad to have tough games early in the stage rather than late in the stage. We kind of faced a really difficult road at the end of last stage, and I'm glad that I think it's unlikely that we'll have such a difficult path at the end of stage 2, especially if we're getting these really tough matches out of the way early.
All right, so before I wrap up, I also have another pop question here. This is a side thing, and there is no right answer except for the one that actually ends up being right. Fuel versus Dragons, the rematch. Who do you got?
You know, I think that this patch is going to be good for Fuel, and as much as I want to believe in the Dragons, I think that this patch is also going to be really tough for the Dragons, with Undead being like very, very focused hit scan player. I think that they could do really well, but I think it'll probably take their mid-season pickups for Dragons to really get going this patch.
Alrighty, well, that brings us to the end here, Jake. Any final words, shout-outs you want to say before we end this episode of The Owl's Nest?
Nothing in particular. Just shout out to all the fans who support us every day. You know, like it's always amazing the level of fan support for you know, productions like this, for the team in general. So just keep doing you out there. Thank you, ZP, as well, for hosting me.
Absolutely, anytime. Well, thank you, Jake, for coming on, and it's always a pleasure.
Likewise, ZP. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Fact Fiction and Jake for stopping by this week's episode. And guys, if you'd like to see more content from these players, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe, and click that little bell to get notifications anytime new content is out. But guys, that's going to do it for us here this week on The Owl's Nest. We'll see you next time.